Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, October 17th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Iowa game is in 5 days, the game against Michigan in 40 days. TV networks love to market college football weekends with cutesy names like Showdown Saturday or whatever the marketing department comes up with. This weekend felt like a separation Saturday. That's one we've heard before. Finally saw some teams play decent opponents. Actually, you're now able to start separating the contenders from the pretenders. So what did we learn? Well, we're going to be talking about that with Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com today. Tony, thanks for being here.
Tom, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure and a joy to be here on the show with you.
Well, Tony, and we were talking right before we recorded, and I forgot to mention this, but before we get to the football, there was some big recruiting news for the Ohio State men's basketball team on Sunday. Chris Holtmann found himself a point guard, so let people know about that.
Yeah, John Mobley Jr., a 2024 point guard who is currently playing at Bishop Gorman, but is originally from Columbus and was slated to play his high school ball at Reynoldsburg, but transferred out to Las Vegas and is, I believe, like the number 7 point guard in the 2024 class, a top 50 player, a guy who continues to get better and better, listed at 6 foot 150, talked about as being one of the best shooters in the nation. And if you watch his highlights, he will pull up from very, very deep across the half court line is basically the range that he will pull up from, and getting comparisons to former Oklahoma Sooner Trae Young, current Atlanta Hawk, who is also known for playing like that. So a shooter, a playmaker, and a guy who is still just getting better and better and is still pretty young. But another recruiting win for Chris Holtmann, first commit in the 2024 class. Might be a small class because the last two have been pretty big. But again, you never know how each class is going to turn out and what the transfer portal is going to do, what the NBA thinks of certain players, as we saw with Malachi Branham. So good start to 2024. Holtmann as the currently the number 5 class in 2023 and the number 8 class in 2022, which is this year's true freshman.
Well, and if the Bishop Gorman name sounds familiar, it is that this is probably the first Ohio State basketball player from Bishop Gorman. They have pulled a couple of football players out of there over the years. Paula Ie now Teote on the current team, of course, via USC, but he came out of the Bishop Gorman program. Haskell Garrett, one of last year's players, and of course, Tony, the greatest Bishop Gorman player of all time. Who is it?
Tate Martel, the only quarterback to lead Bishop Gorman to 45 consecutive wins, 3 straight state titles, 10 of 10 completions and attempts for the Buckeyes. And we just recently recognized October 10th as Tate Martel Day again. It's the it's not an anniversary, but the 10-10 thing is worth recognizing. 10 of 10 passing for the Buckeyes, a school record that still sort of exists, but don't ask about it.
Yes, it still sort of exists until they change the minimum number of attempts required to qualify for the record, and then won't exist anymore. But so far, so good. So, all right. Enough basketball, which has already turned into football. Let's move on to football. And, we will pull back the curtain from time to time. Here it is, confessional time. I missed a whole bunch of the games on Saturday due to another commitment in real life. So I texted you as I was done with all of this stuff and, finally headed home at the end of a very, 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 very long day and said, I just saw the Alabama-Tennessee score, and I had just checked it a couple times throughout the day, and it had been like, oh, well, this looks like quite an eventful afternoon in Knoxville. And I was feeling pretty bad about missing it. And your text back to me was, quote, honestly, one of the best games I've ever seen, which did not actually, Tony, make me feel any better at all. So thank you for that. So I'm going to throw out some things that, after going through kind of watched some highlights and going through some box scores and looked at some numbers and that kind of stuff to sort of see if I can give you my thoughts on what I think we probably learned over the weekend based on what I saw. Now, you, of course, have actually gotten to watch all these games. You probably have a little more insight than I do on this stuff. So I will let you know what I think we might have learned, and you can let me know if I'm correct or incorrect about all of those things. Tony, number one, Alabama's defense, not nearly as good as we thought they were, because I think coming into the week, they were real high in all the advanced statistical metrics, and then Tennessee scored 52 points.
Yeah, they did. And I would give 65% of that credit to Tennessee and give 35% of the blame to Alabama, and maybe higher for Tennessee, actually, because Hendon Hooker, the quarterback, was really, really good. But there are some serious busts defensively in the Alabama secondary when they had guys running wild and deep down the field. You look at Jalen Hyatt for Tennessee, 5 catches, 200 some yards, 5 touchdowns, where like he has 6 catches, 207 yards, 5 touchdowns, but he was running free and catching stuff, and Hooker had time to throw it. Didn't see a lot from Will Anderson in this game, even though he was out there, presumably, but just didn't see a lot of him. But Hendon Hooker was really, really good. There are some times where he just stands in the pocket and literally just stands there. Like he's not like bouncing, he's just standing and then waiting for, his guys, and the way they spread him out, they find him. Alabama was having trouble with the up-tempo stuff. Like, I think this just shows you what you can do to Alabama, or what some teams can do to Alabama. Not everybody is Tennessee's offense, and not everybody has that tempo that Josh Heupel has. And they were making plays, and Alabama's defense, very undisciplined. Overall, the team had like 17 penalties, which is very uncharacteristic for a taskmaster like Nick Saban. So I know people are jumping on this is the end of Alabama, and I see people saying, "Yeah, we say that every year," and I'm not saying it is, but this is now the last 2 seasons, Tom. You look at just the FBS, the Power 5 programs. This is now the 14th game that they have played against FBS programs in the last 2 years. 8 of those games have been decided by a score or less. And that does not include the Arkansas game this year where Alabama was leading 28-23 in the fourth quarter. So it's getting to be normal, I guess, for these close games with Alabama now.
Yeah, that is, that it does feel like things are kind of coming a little closer to Alabama. And then the only question is this a 2015 Ohio State thing where, yeah, they play lots of close games and it's just because they can't, they can't seem to get it together. They can't just get the pieces to work. Or is the level of talent not quite what it was? Or is the level of coaching not quite what it was? I have thought I wonder if this is the end of Alabama enough times, and then not had it be the end of Alabama, that I'm going to just have to see the end of Alabama before I even try to get into the predicting the end of Alabama thing anymore. But yeah, that was notable. And I have the flip side of this on here as well, which is Tennessee is a legitimate playoff contender. I had looked at them coming into this weekend and thought, flashy offense, no defense. This is the kind of thing that catches up with you against better competition. This is like the Lincoln Riley Oklahoma thing where it's like, oh, don't worry. It doesn't matter that the defense is bad. The offense will just outscore the people. And it's like, that doesn't work when you get to a certain quality of competition. But this was not a fluke. Like, they outpassed Alabama 12.4 to 8.8 yards per play, outrushed them 4.7 to 3.7. They lost the turnover battle. This was not a, well, you were +4 in turnovers, so you just kind of fluked your way into a win. Like, Alabama got whooped, at least looking at the box score. And I look at that, and then I wonder, is Georgia's offense going to be able to keep up? Because I know they put up a nice shiny point total against Vanderbilt, but is Georgia's offense is not the most explosive offense in the country. Are they going to be able to either stop Tennessee in a way that they couldn't, that Alabama couldn't, or is Stetson Bennett and the, sort of running the ball and tight end driven offense, are they going to be able to keep up with Tennessee? Because all of a sudden, I would not have given you a 1 in 4 chance of them winning both of those games before yesterday. And now it's like, oh boy, they might beat Georgia too.
Well, and we'll see how physical Georgia can be. That's one of the problems that Alabama has had up front. But the amazing thing is Tennessee was after Bryce Young constantly, and he was making some incredible plays to get free of the pass rush and escape and look downfield. And there were so many scramble drills where they would end up picking 30 yards up. And so if you're facing Stetson Bennett instead of Bryce Young, like, those plays are not happening. There is no scramble drill where he's getting away from 3 tacklers and, running a 4-5 for 30 yards and then throwing it 40 yards. Like, that's not in the math for Georgia. And, Jahmyr Gibbs, their outstanding running back, had some ridiculous plays as well, but they still held him to 103 yards on 24 carries. Like, that's a winning number for that guy, because the long was 26 yards for him, and he's the guy that can go 70 at any time. Same with their other running backs. And so I was, to give up 49 points or whatever to Alabama, it's like I walked away from that game being more impressed with Bryce Young than I'd ever been before. And Tennessee did everything they could to stop him, and they finally got him at the end. But it took a special performance to put 49 points up on the board against Tennessee in this one.
Yeah, that was a day that just sort of like that. Sometimes you'll have that one result that just kind of it feels like a real paradigm shift. That one felt a little like a paradigm shift. I say that, and then this is still Tennessee, so they'll go out and lose to, I don't know, Kentucky or something next week. Whoever they play next week, they'll like that would be the most Tennessee thing, is to lose to whoever they're playing next week. But so far so good for the Vols. That is I'm not often like completely surprised by something that really surprised me on Saturday.
UT Martin next week, so they'll be okay.
Maybe we'll see. In-state rivalry, Tony. You throw out the record books. We say that all the time. All right. And something that didn't really surprise me. Michigan is for real. ... But, and you go back to last week's Michigan Monday show, you will hear me talking about. I think Michigan is good enough to win this game by a couple scores, and but we've talked about trouble finishing in the red zone. We've talked about JJ McCarthy is a really good quarterback, a fantastic athlete, can make do a lot of stuff. But some of the decision making, he's gotten away with some stuff this year, and you'll see how it looks when you're on playing a better opponent. And then I looked at one point, and they were, I think it was like 16-14, but they had 18-1 in first downs. But there was like one long Sean Clifford run, set up a short touchdown, and then they had a Penn State's defense got a defensive score, and and Michigan just kind of like kept kicking field goals in the red zone, and it was like they had completely dominated the game, and they had a 2-point lead. It was just was essentially the first half of the 2019 Fiesta Bowl all over again. Is essentially what that looked like. So to me, this is a Michigan is for real, but kind of game. I think. Am I right there, or am I underselling Michigan?
No, I think when you look at the fact that Michigan ran for 418 yards against Penn State, the majority of that credit goes to Michigan, obviously. But to have somebody run for 418 yards against you with a passing game that is still finding itself, that is also some fault that goes on Manny Diaz and the Penn State defense, to where you can't figure out that they're going to run the ball, and that they ran it 55 times. They threw it 24 times. They averaged 8 yards a carry or so, 7 yards a carry. And it was just Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum. And it's just, at some point, don't you put 8 guys in a box and let JJ McCarthy try to beat you? And really, Penn State didn't do that. They had some weird alignments. They were getting outnumbered constantly, losing leverage, and just a really, really poor performance defensively. Plenty of blame to go around. And then you look at Penn State's running game, the long rush, obviously, of 62 yards for Sean Clifford, but Nick Singleton, Katron Allen combined for 35 yards rushing on 12 carries. Like, Michigan shut those guys down. And it's not like Penn State had to abandon the run because the game was over. I mean, it was a 2-score game and late in the third quarter. Like, they could have kept running if they wanted to. They just couldn't. And then Sean Clifford gets knocked out, and Drew Aller comes in and looks terrified, frankly, at what he was seeing. So this was a really, really poor performance by Penn State. And to have even been in the game in the first half, I think that just tells you how odd football can be. But as Michigan has done so many times this season, the second half, they just wear people out, and it looks, the game ends up being what was a close game at the half ends up being a blowout. And I guess maybe the first half is a blowout in most of those games anyway. We just don't know it yet.
Well, and the next one, I think, is sort of the inverse of the Tennessee thing, where I thought there was a big 2 in the SEC, and now there's a big 3. We thought there was a big 3 in the Big Ten East, and it's like, I mean, you look at the numbers from that game, and it's like, oh no, like there is Ohio State and Michigan, and then there's a big gap, and then you get down to Penn State, and now, below that, I mean, Talia Tagovailoa is probably out for the year, sounded like the last time I heard from Maryland, and, Michigan State's a mess, and then you have Rutgers and Indiana. So it sure feels like, I start these shows with a countdown to the game every week. Am I wrong in saying, like, I could just skip the first one and just count down to the game because that's all this is going to come down to this season. Am I wrong about that?
No, I don't think so. And even if Michigan trips up against Illinois the week before they play Ohio State, that game is still for all of the marbles. So yeah, it's like that is the only thing that matters now. And both teams should be double-digit favorites in every game they play the rest of the way out until that one. And who knows, maybe Ohio State's a double-digit favorite in that final game too.
All right, and so okay, you mentioned Illinois. Let's have a talk about Illinois because Tony, is Illinois going to win the Big Ten West? Are we going to see? I mean, we were talking before the show. It's like the Illinois Purdue winner probably has the inside track. That game is at Illinois. It's been the Big Ten championship game the division started in 2014, and it feels like the Big Ten West is going to be won by one of two teams that has never won the Big Ten West before. Which is, I mean, that's going to be interesting. It'll be fun. It will be, not just another Wisconsin or another, good Northwestern year. Are we going to see Brett Bielema in Illinois, in Indianapolis? Assuming Ohio State beats that Michigan team, are we going to be covering a Brett Bielema press conference in Indianapolis in December?
I think so, because Purdue is more apt to lose games they shouldn't than Illinois has shown that they are this year, even though they've already lost a game that they shouldn't, I'd say. But we've seen a longer history of Jeff Brom completely losing a game that was like, how did this happen? And Illinois is maybe safer with the ball, and Tommy DeVito getting back, helping them play better. It's really bizarre, but Brett Bielema has a history of just being solid enough. Gosh darn it, he's good enough. That sort of thing. And in the Big Ten West, that's all you need to be. Half of it is, don't hurt yourself and let the other team do that for you, and then just capitalize on stuff. I do think it will be hilarious if it's, Illinois or Purdue makes it, and then the Big Ten immediately is like, next year, like, we're getting rid of divisions. We cannot have this again. This was the last straw. And it's a season where if there were no divisions this year, you'd be playing Ohio State, Michigan back to back. And I know some fans are absolutely against that. I think I'm okay with it, covering it. I think it would be incredible. I don't know how that helps or hurts the rivalry. I know ratings would be amazing, but I need to be convinced that it's good or bad one way or the other. I think it's good.
Well, it feels like we'll know for sure, like that day, the whole week going into that game and walking into the stadium on that day, you'll kind of know in advance, like, oh, this feels like this is a rerun. Like we've already watched this one, or, but now you have to come up with the answer to the answers that you provided last week and the answers that you saw from the other team last week.
But wouldn't the real emotion or the knowledge would come the first game, where like, this game doesn't matter, like, that you're going to be playing again the next week. So like the mood of that first game, I think, would be where you actually feel like, oh no, this is bad.
Well, I guess it depends on what the situation is. If they've both clinched it and it's, this is the baseball team that's already clinched its division, and then it's just sort of like playing out the string. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that and I guess if you've already lost, maybe if both teams have both lost a game, so you're not going to be able to get away with losing a second game. So maybe you take it more seriously, but still,
if you're both 11-0, you can afford to lose that game because you're going to get the chance to go 12-1 by beating that team and negating the loss. I think that's why a lot of people are like, I don't like it, but it will be interesting to see if Michigan can ever get to that point 2 years in a row or something, like, and do it next year, if there are divisions or not. But, I guess we'll know for sure then, like you said.
That is like the darkest twist on an Urban Meyer, the old Urban Meyerism. What's the best thing about being 11-0? The opportunity to go 12-1. That's like, boy, that's that I'm not sure I'm ready for. 2 weeks in a row of Ohio State, Michigan hype and excitement and all that kind of stuff. That would be fine. But yeah, boy, that's a little weird twist.
You think Buckeye fans are upset about Ohio State resting players now?
Hey, speaking of things from Urban Meyer's era that are a little bleak, let's talk about Alex Grinch's defense. Holy Moses. USC's defense, Tony, every bit as bad as we thought it might be. This is, there was the Tennessee that the offense was able to outscore, and the bad defense didn't catch up with them. The bad defense caught up with USC once again. Tony, which Power 5 job is Alex Grinch going to somehow parlay this crappy defense into? Because nothing seems to matter. He has got me as nihilistic about football coaching as anyone outside of Brian Ferentz. Like, nothing matters. Just nothing is a meritocracy. Just give up 43 points, and then let's talk about should he take over Alabama next year? Who's to say, Tony? Who's to say?
The answer is, of course he should. He's Alex Grinch. He's young. He's hip. He's shiny. And then, of course, you see all of the points being scored on his defenses. And yeah, would they give up like 180 yards, 160 yards receiving to a Utah tight end? And like the tight end, like 16 catches, I think he had. You should be able to do something to limit that. Or even if you want to give up 16 catches to the tight end, they should be like 80 yards total, because they're such, they're such short things that it's like, we will give you that. But if you're going to continue to throw down the field, we're going to have to take that away. And they have an inability to take stuff away. And it's, this was one of those things where it's like, you expected at some point this season, when you see it, you're like, I knew it, called it. Like, everybody called this with the USC defense. Like, okay, you can bring Alex Grinch over, but like, we all know what's going to happen. I assume Lincoln Riley understands what's going to happen. Like, he's the one that sees it firsthand all the time anyway. But, maybe he thought there'd be more talent on hand, or you do it knowing like, yes, we know this is going to happen, but don't worry. We've got the offense. We'll outscore them. We'll build the defense as it is. But you're right, Tom. Maybe Alex Grinch gets a head coaching job before they get that defense righted.
It is, he is the constant. It's nice to have the constant in the universe to just, kind of ground you that, yes, this is reality. This is nothing has changed. I was home in time to watch kind of the last half or so of that game. And boy, I love watching Utah football. I'm not even going to lie. Like, that is a team that does more with less than virtually anyone in the country. I loved covering that Rose Bowl last year, and you're listening to Kyle Whittingham talk and talking to those players. That is a program I really, really enjoyed covering, and I think that's a program that's just finally starting to get some of the credit. And they were supposed to be maybe a playoff team this year. They're not going to get there. They got a couple losses probably, so they're probably out already. But yeah, that is a really good, solid football program, and exactly the kind of football program that will trip up a team like USC, which is shiny and flashy and only plays one side of the ball. You love to see it. Speaking, Lincoln Riley teams failing because of a lack of defense, another constant in the universe. Always fun to see that. So, well, Tony, thank you for walking me through what was quite an eventful weekend of college football, and looking forward to getting back into the normal swing of things. And with the Buckeyes playing this Saturday, we'll have a full week of podcasts. If you were wondering, hey, did they stop doing the Buckeye Weekly podcast? Sorry, I will raise my hand. My fault. Sorry. It was quite a week last week. We'll be back to a normal rotation of shows, including our Michigan Monday show coming on Monday, and then head into a normal fun week of Buckeye Weekly podcasts, Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast, great coverage at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We'll have all of that coming for you this week. So as we head into the kind of the home stretch of the season coming up, it'd be a great time to sign up at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Got a fantastic team of insiders, recruiting guys, Alex Glettman and Mark Givler absolutely killing it on the recruiting beat. Tony Gerdeman, Kevin Noon and I all doing the team coverage. And then, of course, our X's and O's guys, Justin Whitlatch, Stephen Radcliffe, and Ross Fulton, all just fantastic, really, really insightful guys. We'll have at least one of them on later in the week, talk a little X's and O's on this show as well. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.